Benvenuti a tutti per questa edizione pomeridiana della Smart City School. Abbiamo ospite questo pomeriggio Giulia Girardi Hoog, che è già stata nostra ospite anche l'anno
Hello.
scorso, alla quale do il nostro più caldo benvenuto. Più caldo perché a Vienna sta nevicando, quindi ovviamente trasmettiamo un po' di calore dalla Sardegna.
Hi.
Eh, il tema che affronterà Giulia è un tema molto, molto importante perché il tema dell'edilizia sociale, ehm, che è stata in qualche modo messa alla prova durante la pandemia del coronavirus, è un tema che riguarda e riguarderà le nostre città in modo sempre più importante, perché le nostre città sono sottoposte continuamente a stress e shock e devono trovare delle modalità per gestire queste situazioni, questi stress. L'edilizia sociale deve trovare nuove risposte in modo tale da rendere le città più coese e più inclusive. Non si può ovviamente continuare a ragionare con le modalità tipiche dell'edilizia sociale del passato, che creava dei ghetti fondamentalmente, delle enclave che si trasformavano poi anche e generavano problemi sociali, oltre che congestioni anche dal punto di vista del traffico e fenomeni di pendolarismo. Quindi nuove modalità per interpretare l'edilizia sociale e rientra un po' in quelle forme di nuove povertà determinate dalla pandemia e determinate da queste anche da tutti gli altri stress e shock a cui le città sono sottoposte. Penso ai cambiamenti climatici che arrivano a distruggere contesti e lasciando distruzione e morte alle proprie spalle e rendendo quindi grandi parti della popolazione totalmente inermi e senza più niente. Quindi dobbiamo porci già in anticipo queste problematiche, essere capaci di rispondere efficacemente con le nostre istituzioni, con le nostre politiche e la nostra pianificazione a queste grandi sfide. Quindi gli esempi che ci porterà Giulia sono esattamente in questa direzione, nel raccontarci l'esperienza di Vienna in particolare. Quindi le lascio subito la parola e la ringrazio di essere con noi anche quest'anno. Prego Giulia.
Ciao. Hello from
Ciao a tutti da Vienna, grazie per avermi invitato di nuovo a questa scuola sulle smart city.
you can tell by my pink headphones. I'm at home now and I have two boys that usually steal my headphones, so I had to get pink ones, so not to be stolen from me. So just in case you wonder. I'm going to share with you today the challenges and the answers or our attempts to answer to the challenges in an innovative way. As Luigi said, social housing is immensely important to cities to keep the population safe, keep them in the cities. We can see now cities that don't have a lot of social housing, where the average people, and especially the people with income below average, are driven out of the city centers by speculators, by investors that buy inner city housing, central housing, make it super expensive, and therefore drive away the people, the inhabitants from the city center. And I can tell you now, with Vienna, we have an enormous amount of public housing. I'm working now for the City of Vienna housing unit for Wiener Wohnen. And we are in the fortunate situation that we have 220,000 municipal flats, and of which most of them are administered by my administration, by Wiener Wohnen. So we are Europe's largest property manager, really. It's a lot. And in around 2,000 housing complexes, we have around 5,000 storage rooms. So it's enormous, 47,000 garages and over 4,000 employees. So we're huge. And then you can imagine in such a huge company, just like any other company, really, driving change is a challenge, and I'm going to tell you how we approach this situation that is currently changing. Also, of course, Corona is now a major challenge to us, but also other topics are popping up, such as climate change, such as also demographic change, but I will get to you step by step. So I'm talking about roughly 500,000, so 435,000 people that live in the Gemeindebau. So for Vienna, with almost 2 million people, you can say that every fourth person lives in one of our premises. So, and all in all, around 180 nationalities. So it's a very international background I'm talking about. And this is a map of Vienna, the entire metropolitan area of Vienna, and the inner city center. And you see that all the green dots are actually Gemeindebau. So you can see that we really made sure that there is a Gemeindebau in every district, even in the very city center, even next to the historical Stephansdom, we have Gemeindebau. And the concept goes back 100 years. Last year we celebrated 100 years of Gemeindebau, which was at the beginning a social revolution, because by building social housing, but building premises that included water, running water, and the toilet in the apartment. The standard was actually better than in some of the villas of the bourgeois houses at that time, and that was considered a social revolution. That the worker, it's a deeply social democratic approach, that the workers should have decent housing conditions, just as the rich people. So, and then it was never sold or given away, and it's even increased now, this housing stock. So this has really been a policy of keeping a hand on social housing, and many cities are really jealous that we still have so many houses. And maybe you followed the discourse in Berlin or other cities, where the cities are trying to get back the housing stock that was formerly owned by the state or by the city, and then at some time was sold away, and now they're trying to get it back. So this is really something very smart to kind of hold on to the housing stock a city has, to keep it from the forces of the liberal market. But then we have to look, and I'm going to show you now is what we do. We really we not just provide housing, but we also follow a lot up and keep an eye on what's happening with our inhabitants, who are our tenants, what are their problems, and how can we address them, and how can we keep a healthy mixture, so not to create ghettos within our housing stock. So you can see where this is a list of countries where our tenants come from, and roughly around half of our tenants comes from Austria originally, or has only a citizenship in Austrian, and the other citizenships are from Turkey, from the former Balkan countries, Poland, of course, our neighboring countries, and increasingly also from Syria and Egypt, from the conflict regions right now, but also, for example, Germany. So there's really a wide mixture of people we have, and from some communities, they really understood how to get into Gemeindebau. There's even half of the population in our premises. So what happened in the last years is that increasingly non-EU citizens moved into the Gemeindebau, and the amount of Austrian citizens decreased, which is not a problem as such. Of course, Vienna is an international city, and that's part of our identity and also our economy. We depend on tourists, and we've historically always been an international city. But it does something to the neighborhoods, and people have different traditions of how to live when they come from African countries versus from Central European countries. So we can see we deal a lot with neighborhood negotiations and moderations to keep these new tendencies working, and they work. We can say that it's peaceful, and it's no problem as such. It's just that we really have to increasingly be ready to answer all these questions of intercultural neighborhoods and mediation. We have special teams for that, and that really go out for neighborhood conflicts, the Wohnpartners, and that has proven to be highly successful. And also, when we come along to technological changes, we are increasingly using digitalizing our services. And I will show you some more socio-demographic data. We really need to make sure that people understand how we, as their housing provider, want to talk to them, what possibilities they have to rent certain rooms in the house or to communicate with us. So we really need multiplicators within our housing stock to keep people, to take them with us on our trip to a smarter city, to a smarter neighborhood, to really tell them about the challenge, the chances, the new opportunities that we create for them. So when we're looking at what happened in Vienna, this is also what happened in the building stock. Vienna has grown younger and older at the same time. So with the migration and the urbanization, a lot of young families has moved to Vienna and has gotten a lot of kids, which is great. So we have a very young population that keeps the average quite low. But we also know, and it's the same for Italy, I know the demographics there, what you're concerned about is also an enormous and a very big generation of the baby boomers that is now moving into a retirement age slowly. And that, of course, creates an enormous challenge also to a housing provider when we look at the barrier-free environment that is needed to get people safely into pensioners' age. So, but still, the amount of children keeps the age average the lowest of all counties in Austria. So Vienna is the oldest city, the youngest city in Austria, the youngest county in Austria. All the other counties have a higher age average. And such things are really important to know, especially when a company is that large as we are, with so many tenants. It's very important to first have a look at and to follow up what sort of people live there before you design measures. So what is also happening and what created problems during Corona is the household size. So I'm not sure about Italy, but as increasingly metropolitan areas, we have single households on the rise. Currently, we have 44% single households, and that's something. Usually, or like probably 10 years ago, the single households were either very young people before they met a partner and had kids, and or elderly people, mostly elderly people where the partner had died and they were very lonely. And now we can see this tendency is across all ages. We have people of all ages living alone, being divorced, never married, whatever, and they are increasingly lonely, and especially during Corona, when a lot of possibilities to meet other people were closed. We saw that the amount of loneliness increased dramatically, and loneliness is really not healthy for us. I'm not sure if you're aware that in England they have the Minister of Loneliness, because really human people are not made to be alone. They become sick, they become stressed, and we feel as a housing provider, they call us all the time. They want to talk. They need to talk, and they call us maybe 5 times a day to complain about something, and because probably mainly just to get an answer on the phone, to get a phone call back about something they complained. And this increased now also, and this creates, of course, costs. We need to pay people to pick up the phone to listen to the same complaints and to just talk to the people, right? So we're designing, I will show you later, and then especially, usually these people are elderly people because they're not in the labor market anymore, and maybe the partner has died or has moved away, and then that way they are lonely. What we saw during Corona is that even increasingly younger people got lonely and started calling us for some reasons. So we could really see that the call center was going through the roof during the pandemic, which is still going on. We are again in lockdown right now. So we really had to stock up on call center staff. But we see that the necessity to do connective projects to get people in touch with their neighbors is increasing dramatically. So we need to do more to make people meet. And this is a planner's task as well. How can we design public spaces, let people meet? How can we design neighborhoods so people meet and still have a quietness? So this is always a conflict we have. Whatever we do for the children, we just discussed that there's a lot of children. There's always complaints by elderly that complain about the noise. Yeah, this is just natural. It always comes along. So it's really not so easy to do the right planning. And I keep telling my people that we need to go into these discussions. In Vienna, we usually try to do it right for everybody, and the person with the strongest lobby wins usually. But I don't think in growing cities this can be the way, but rather the way will be to design projects together with the citizens in order to increase acceptance and in order to keep things going. Because otherwise, what often happens is that people, planners or companies, they get afraid of the complainers and don't do anything. And that would be the worst, not to do anything. Of course, there's always going to be discussion. Change is always an issue for people, but still we should never stop improving, stop moving. What we can also see is the 2-person household is around 27%, and then comes the families with 3, 4, 5 persons. And we have a slightly larger proportion of very large families also in the Gemeindebau with more than 4 children, but this is very marginal. And then what I said before is that due to the building age, most of the buildings we have are from we call them post-war area. So after the Second World War, most of the buildings of our social housing buildings were built actually, and then the elevator was not a standard issue, so it was often added with the first renovation wave. That means that not all apartments can be accessed without climbing stairs. So when you attach the elevator from the outside of a building, what often happens is that you enter the building at the staircase between the floor. So you have to still climb some stairs to get the apartment, which is better than, of course, than doing all the stairs. But it is a problem for elderly people in a wheelchair or on walking aids to do those 5, 7, 8 stairs. So we are really working hard on smart solutions to increase the amount of really barrier-free apartments. Then we have the big issue of poverty in the Gemeindebau. We have 36% living on the edge of poverty. And we're talking about 500,000 people, 500,000 people, of which 36% is quite a large amount. And why I'm saying this is that I did a project before, Smart Together, that I presented last year. And then my aim is, due to smart technology, to technologically advanced measures. Me as a sociologist, I'm always afraid that we lose part of the population. They are not so wealthy, they're not so educated, and that would be disastrous. So I'm always trying to show how it's possible to work with the less fortunate, and but also with the average people. So in the Gemeindebau, okay, we have 36% of our tenants live on the edge of poverty, but the rest is just average people. So I always encourage tech students to come to our houses and test their ideas, because after all, a smart city is a city for everybody. It's not a city for just the very privileged. It has to be a good technology, a sustainable technology. It should be so easy that it's understood by everybody. And so that's why I'm always teaching about our projects also in the Gemeinde, so people can learn, students can learn how to roll it out. So half of all the unemployed people in Vienna live in our premises, and 15% live in manifested poverty. So they can't afford basic needs such as heating, warm food, and they got even poorer now during the pandemic. So we really work hard to get extra funding for them. So far we didn't evict anybody who couldn't pay the rent, because there has been a stop of eviction for public housing in Vienna and Austria. So what we saw was that poverty and unemployment rate doubled in the years now, in the almost 2 years of Corona. And that's, of course, disastrous. It's disastrous for children, but also for elderly. It increases the stress of the people, and it increases social tensions. We can see that, we can feel that, we can hear it in the summer, especially when the windows are open, but also our the Wohnpartner, our people, our social workers, case managers, they all report that these increased social tensions are there, and there will be for some time. So we look very closely, and these are new numbers, and at how old are the people living there, because when I joined Wiener Wohnen 2 years ago, I had the feeling it's only old people, because they have the strongest lobby. They complain all the time, they call all the time. We don't have children calling and complaining that the elderly are so silent, but we have a lot of elderly people calling and complaining that the kids are so loud. So there's an amazing imbalance in which design is created, and most of the designs are created for the elderly, because they're most present. They have the strongest lobby. They call, complain a lot, and they elect the vote. So what we did was statistics to show that the amount of under 14-year-olds is just the same as the amount of 65 and elderly. So by getting these numbers, it's really a good tool to show that children have rights. They don't have a voice, or not a strong voice, but they have rights, and they are there, and they are just the same amount as the elderly. So we are now working on, I'll show you the examples of designing processes together. The needs seem to be quite different and quite contradictory at first. The elderly lady wants a rose bushes probably, and wants it quiet, and the kids, of course, want to run around and want to play football or whatever, and that seems to be very contradictory. But actually, when you bring them together and make designs for both of the groups, it works. Not always, but in many cases we've seen that it works, and I'll give you some examples for that. So what happens now in Vienna, and it's going to be next year, I'm not sure if you know the format. It's very interesting for architects. It's the International Building Exhibition, IBA. It stands for Internationale Bauausstellung. Bauausstellung, yeah. So it's, many people know IBA Hamburg, where the first buildings around the Alp were built. So it's really a format for architecture, for for architecture of the future. This year, I think it's in Heidelberg, the IBA, and next year it will be in Vienna. So if you're architects, make sure you come to Vienna, or spatial planners, everybody. And we have a lot of different, all over Vienna, we have a lot of different projects. And I'm proud to say that I'm in charge of the IBA Quartier in the Per Albin Hansson Siedlung, which is a 50s, 60s area. And the name sounds, Per Albin Hansson, sounds quite Swedish. And that has the reason because it was built just after Second World War, when Vienna was all destroyed. And then the prime minister at that time, Per Albin Hansson, gave a machine to Vienna to make Vibra stones out of the war-damaged houses. So it's one of the first stories of circular building, right? Circular material use, something that we discuss a lot today, circular economy, circular everything. So I really like the Per Albin Hansson Siedlung. That is a beautiful story, also of international cooperation, but also how to make a beautiful new beginning after such a horrible thing like the Second World War. And the question of the IBA exhibition that is going to be all over Vienna next year is new social housing. So how can a large urban housing, and in our case was the question, how can a large urban housing estate from the 70s be made fit for future and adapted to today's living needs? So because the area is quite big, the first oldest houses are just from the 50s, early 60s, just after the Second World War, and then the larger buildings are then from the 60s and 70s. So we're going to look at what do we test there. And we are so really happy about this building exhibition because it gives us the chance to do a lot of pilot testing that is usually hard to do in such a very big institution. But when you have a dedicated area and a dedicated frame like this building exhibition to test various approaches, different approaches, new approaches, it's really good chance. And so we made sure to test a lot. So one of the things was that we tried to open up the public spaces again for the kids. I'm not sure how you do that in Italy, but in Vienna, as I said before, they're mainly very quiet, and there are some cages, we call them. These are some football places. They're ideally next to streets, like highways or something, where they are very far away from the residential buildings. And we did a soccer cup together with the SOS Children's Village to do football training for boys and girls near a nursery home, and next to a nursery home actually. And we invited the elderlies to watch the kids play. In the end was a big tournament then where the different kids played, and a boccia game. They played boccia or bull. I'm not sure, you throw the balls at one little target ball. And so we really made sure, and now at this grassy spot, we're going to build a new sitting area, which will be, and also have a lot of games painted on the street, which is supposed to be and addressed to be for the elderly and the youngest. So in order to bring these groups together, because it worked very well. Yeah, the elderlies were really happy to be watching children and telling stories. And the kids were really happy about the attention, because you don't see it so much here, but the kids are really underprivileged oftentimes in the Gemeinde. The parents are either unemployed or working many jobs, and they are increasingly overweight. So we are afraid many of them might grow diabetes, which is really bad for them and also quite expensive for the economy. So there's really a good reason to be looking at the children's health in many ways, and it's our duty, I think, to be integrating also their needs. And we can see now with the pandemic that the suicidal rate among children has doubled, and almost half of the kids stated that they have depressive periods now. So this is really something that we need to look at when we plan the city of the future to get happy people again, and most of all happy kids also, to find spaces where they can safely be. And now comes the challenge of the global warming, because Vienna is largely hit by it. We can see a temperature increase, I think already 3 degrees in the last 50 years. So we will be one of the hardest hit areas of the climate change, of the global warming in Central Europe, because we don't have an ocean breeze. We have a lot of concrete spaces that save the heat. So we need a lot of good ideas. And this multiplies then. We have a lot of elderly people living in apartments. Also, the elderly are deeply affected by the heat waves, and the kids. And of course, I'm talking to you Italians. That's nothing new to you, hot summers, but you're prepared better. Your houses have shading, usually external shading. Ours don't. If you look at the buildings in the back, there's nothing. There is no external shading. And now is the big discussion of climate, of air conditioning, and I'm completely against too much air conditioning, because it drives the energy bills into astronomers' heights. And we have signed an agreement, Vienna, that we want to be energy or CO2 neutral by 2040. So there's no way we can start installing now a lot of air condition. So what we really need to do is to think about better insulating the buildings and external shadings. And we always look at Italy with the beautiful wooden external shading constructions, the different variations you have, because you have this tradition of the hot summers. So far, yeah, it's not been cold in Vienna, but there were a couple of days above 30 degrees, and it was never so long. But now increasingly we have days over 40 degrees, and people are still used to always having the windows open. And so we really need to retrain also how to use our houses, and we do a lot of training there. What we also do is we have a pilot project on digitalization for the elderly. As I said before, the baby boomers there are a lot of them moved into the Gemeindebau when they were young and started their families, and they stayed, which is nice, which shows that they are happy, and they will now spend the rest of their life there, the last years. And we have a beautiful IT team at Wiener Wohnen with 500,000 people. It's great. You can digitalize a lot. You have a lot of data immediately. But naturally, the elderly tenants are not the early adopters. So we did a project now within the IBA to find 30 seniors older than 65. And there's some funny stories about that in the Per Albin Hansson Siedlung. So we really limited it to this area, and they had to apply. Those people interested in receiving a clock with an alarm setting, so with an alarm button. If they are in trouble or if they've fallen down, they can press the button, and there is a direct line then to emergency services. And they receive an iPad and trainings. They have to participate in trainings, and in these trainings that should be bilateral learning. So we teach them in the first session how to use this iPad, but in the next sessions it will be an open dialogue, and we want to learn from them. That's why we do it. What digital services they would use and they would need, and how they would need to look like so they could use them. If they would, for example, like to meet other elderly people in the neighborhood with the same interests, if they would like to go for walks with other ladies, I don't know, in their 60s, or is age something they want to talk about, or do they want just to meet up with others, or would they want to join a circle where they would go to the pharmacy for each other. And what we could see is that they are really very open to be also helpful for others, but they don't know how to do it. They don't know anyone anymore. The others moved away. The husband died. The kids are somewhere else. And they're just alone, and they just don't want to walk up to a stranger and ask him if he needs help. So it's really about creating channels and creating the right channels. And also I don't want to sound too simple, but to create solutions also for the average people and for the elderly. And a funny thing is that out of 60 people applied with handwriting. They had to fill in cards. We sent a postcard to every household older than 65. And in case they were interested, they had to fill in the age and the name and why, just a small note on why they would want to participate. And I can tell you, the future of digitalization is female. Out of the 60 applicants, there were 45 women. So it's actually a lot of elderly women that are open to new technology, want to take part, and want to learn something new and want to connect. So that's really beautiful. And we unfortunately we had to postpone it a lot now because the first meetings need to be physical, analog, to show them the iPad and everything. And of course, this is the most vulnerable group we have. So we had to postpone it for a whole year, and we have now just started, and it's going really well. So they are really quick learners, very motivated, and they are already using the iPad and checking the weather and the applications that we uploaded already. So what we do a lot also, because what we see that happens a lot is destruction and vandalism in social housing. I think probably that's true for everywhere, that overnight the houses get sprayed on, and once the first sprayer was there, the second and the third and the fourth is not so far, and it's very expensive to clean the houses from the spraying. And what we saw is that if we do it together, the design and the paintings, then it keeps for much longer. So the sprayers have some respect for the work of others, other artists. So we do a lot of co-creating the especially passageways that are often areas where people feel unsafe. It's dark, but we want them to walk, right? So also mobility is a big issue in the IBA. How to create and assist the people in their everyday walking or getting to work, and therefore it's important to have nice and shady and very safe footpaths. And so we walk a lot with the tenants and ask them where they feel good and why they choose the walks, how they do, and then the areas where they feel most unsafe, which they would maybe also avoid at night, those areas we addressed, and we repainted them, some of with kids, teenagers, some of them with professional artists, and that helps a lot. People appreciate it immensely to have something interesting to look at, and this is not really expensive, right? This is quite to provide the paint and to pay for the artists to work with the kids and to make it nicely. This proved to be really successful. And then another activity we did was that we used the bus laboratory to focus on the specific needs of girls and young people, but also girls, on every afternoon for a period of time, and ask them in a playful exploratory processes. So that was a professor of the Technical University, Karin Harata, and they developed a lot of methodology how to talk with young people about space, about their everyday space, because you can't show them formal planning. Yeah, nobody understands it. Everybody, okay. But I can tell you, nobody understands it if they don't have a planning background. So it's really important to go out there, talk to the people, walk with them, their ways, and use and develop tools to really make sure they understand what you show them, the planning, and understand and find out about their spatial needs in very different ways. So in this case, we found out that especially migrant girls, there's a lot of kids, and when we opened the bus, and then we had some offerings for them. They got some juice and cakes, which is cookies, which was already an attractor for kids that maybe don't have so much money back home. And then also we used some questionnaires and started building furniture, wooden furniture. And then there was some girl afternoons where only girls were allowed. And they told us that they have hardly anywhere to go. And the playgrounds are mostly occupied by the boys. And we could even see that in the afternoons when we were there was always boys showing up and asking when the girl thing is finally over and when it's finally their time again, because they usually assume that this bus must be for boys because they are the bosses in the hood. So from that learnings, we now started the project of developing differentiated spaces for kids in different ages, but also for the different genders, because they have completely different needs from after an age of 6 or 7. Before that, it's all fine. But then until the teenage years, they have very different needs. And usually the boys are stronger in taking space, occupying their space, and the girls need more defined spaces for them. And so this was a really good methodology with the bus, a laboratory which is mobile. It stopped on many places in Vienna, and it stopped also in the Per Albin Hansson Siedlung. And we really appreciated the learnings from that. What we also see is that dementia is growing a lot, because the baby boomers are growing in size. It's just a statistical matter that also the 1 in 10 over 60-year-olds, I'm not so sure on the numbers, but just to give you an idea. So if you have a lot of people in that age, there's the probability that a lot of them will grow dementia is going to increase. So we have offered trainings for all members of staff of Wiener Wohnen, because we often end up being in touch with elderly people that maybe turn aggressive or don't answer the questions, or answer questions but then are confused with the effect of that answer, and that can often be dementia. So and there also needs a lot of technological development. We know that the amount of people in that age is going to be so much bigger than today, and many of them will have challenges like this. And in a city, very few of them are tightly connected with their children that will see that, okay, mama or papa is getting a bit special. So we could see that our staff was very open to this training, and we gave a training on how to tell that people have clients or tenants have dementia, or what could be signs for it, and how to speak to them, how to handle them, how to ask questions to make sure they have understood, or to also and to not confuse them even more. And so the dementia workshop was quickly booked up, and we have to book more trainers. And what we also did is that we learned it in Sweden actually, to put defibrillators in neuralgic places, because we can see that in a case of a cardiac arrest, it's very important, first of all, to have a defibrillator, but also to use it. And there's a lot of reluctance in people to use it to help. There's studies how people how high the likelihood will be that in Sweden, if you have a cardiac arrest, the probability that you will be helped within the first minutes is so much higher than in Austria, because it needs the tool, it needs the defibrillator, but it also needs the awareness of the people around to use it and to approach the person lying on the floor, to call the ambulance, to get the defibrillator, to listen to the instructions. It's not about using it because it's very self-explanatory, but it's about the readiness that you need to create. And this is what I work a lot on, is both what technology you need, what technological issues you need to solve, but also what you need to do in order to make technology the most effective, the most used. And we could see that whenever we open a defibrillator, we do a lot of training workshops for kids in schools, but also for just the neighborhood. And usually they have a party with it, so there's free drinks. And usually people are quite interested and come. And then we could see that after the first training, which takes around half an hour or so, the quick hands-on training, then people start explaining it themselves to the neighbors that maybe come later. So the seeds that you plant there, in a way, they usually grow very, very far. So these are some of the learnings and of the projects that we've done in the last 1.5 years. So now I put on my pink headphones again so I can see you. So I hope you're still with me.
Sentiamo perfettamente. Hai dato un interessantissimo scorcio, un interessantissimo racconto di come le città devono affrontare queste problematiche. Il tema dei bambini e degli anziani, no? In qualche modo considerati gli elementi più deboli della popolazione, come gli spazi pubblici devono essere pensati per queste categorie, è un tema centrale e importante per il nostro futuro. Per 2 motivi, come hai sottolineato. Uno, perché le nostre popolazioni sono sempre più vecchie, sintomo del progresso che sappiamo, le popolazioni tendono a vivere più a lungo, che da un lato è un elemento molto positivo, dall'altro ci deve però porre in un'ottica di soddisfare quelle che sono le esigenze di una popolazione così diversa. Quindi questa categoria deve essere assolutamente considerata nelle sue esigenze, anche perché diventerà sempre più maggioritaria. I bambini sono il nostro futuro e quindi come non avere attenzione per il nostro futuro se non guardando le esigenze dei bambini. Noi tendiamo a essere un po' miopi da questo punto di vista, invece, forse presi dal nostro quotidiano, forse presi dal risolvere problemi che sembrano grandi. In realtà non guardiamo quello che abbiamo a fianco, che sono i nostri bambini, e non agiamo adeguatamente. Poi talvolta sono loro a riportarci invece coi piedi per terra e a dirci: guarda che devi fare questo, tante volte i nostri figli lo fanno, no? Riescono con 2 parole a riportarci nella concretezza, di quelle che sono le cose importanti della vita. E questo noi dobbiamo avere, questo sguardo dobbiamo averlo anche nella progettazione della città. Dobbiamo ascoltarli, ascoltare le loro esigenze, riuscire a recepirle, riuscire a tradurle in spazi di vita, in spazi sociali. Hai toccato tanti altri temi, anche quello della sicurezza, il fatto legato, parlavi adesso in ultimo dei defibrillatori, e del fatto che se non formi le persone, tu puoi dare la tecnologia, ma se non le formi è inutile. E questo elemento è importantissimo. Noi talvolta pianifichiamo tanto, ci preoccupiamo della forma degli spazi, ma non ci preoccupiamo di come vengono usati e quindi di dare alle persone le competenze per utilizzare quegli spazi, che magari dotiamo di tecnologia, dotiamo di elementi, ma poi di fatto non li spieghiamo adeguatamente, e quindi spesso le persone si trovano a vivere spazi che non sanno come funzionano, ma basterebbe pochissimo, basta un minimo per consentirgli invece di utilizzarli al meglio. chiaramente il tema dei defibrillatori è molto particolare, però vale un po' in generale come discorso. Quindi insomma, io trovo che mi è piaciuto molto anche il bus, bellissimo, il laboratorio sull'autobus. Hai dato tanti spunti e tanti elementi su cui riflettere, e che anche in generale poi e che in particolare i nostri partecipanti potranno utilizzare nel progetto che stanno definendo per la scuola. Più di tutto, al di là dell'esercizio che adesso loro faranno, chiaramente a me interessa che il tuo messaggio, la tua testimonianza, la tua esperienza, la tua grande esperienza in questo campo sia poi a vantaggio non solo dei nostri partecipanti, ma più in generale di chi ci ascolta. E quindi per questo l'idea della scuola è di lasciare le lezioni aperte per tutti, gratuitamente, anche dopo la fine della scuola, proprio perché questo tipo di esperienze abbiano la maggior diffusione possibile, devono diventare patrimonio comune, come approccio, come idea, come modello. Quello che infatti sto dicendo anche ai nostri partecipanti è: non pensate solo a un disegno fisico del quartiere, della città, pensate anche alla componente immateriale. La città è fatta di persone, non è fatta solo di aspetti fisici. E quindi le azioni immateriali sono altrettanto importanti quanto quelle materiali. Non è solo come disegnare una piazza o un attraversamento, ma come quella gente, quella parte di popolazione userà quello spazio, e quindi dobbiamo magari dargli degli elementi che non necessariamente riguardano un aspetto architettonico, un aspetto urbanistico, ma un aspetto sociale, appunto, di formazione o anche di un momento di condivisione, una partecipazione. Ci sono tanti spunti tra quelli che hai fornito che possono essere un riferimento. Non so se c'è qualche domanda da parte dei nostri partecipanti, qualche curiosità su quanto ci ha raccontato Giulia, al di là dei complimenti che chiaramente vedo già scritti nella chat. Se qualcuno ha qualche domanda, non so se potete alzare la mano ovviamente per intervenire, se avete una curiosità. Giuseppe, mi fai sapere se c'è qualcuno che vuole intervenire. Io purtroppo non vedo le mani.
Everyone is tired, hungry.
Però sarà eventualmente, passeremo i contatti o ti girerò io le domande o le curiosità via mail per avere magari qualche materiale, qualche approfondimento. Se poi avessi, ti invito come sempre, se tra i tuoi impegni avessi la possibilità di partecipare al laboratorio di progettazione che facciamo dalle 6 alle 8, dalle 18 alle 20, ovviamente sei invitata e avremo molto piacere di averti con noi per ragionare nello specifico sul caso di studio. E quindi ti invito assolutamente, se hai tempo, tra famiglia e lavoro. È un difficile equilibrio. Tu hai detto il futuro è prima hai detto il futuro è donna.
I'll try.
È vero, io ne sono consapevole, assolutamente ne sono consapevole. C'è una domanda sulla chat, te la traduco. Melanie te la traduce. L'uso dei defibrillatori, oltre a essere accompagnato da una formazione, è accompagnato da una deresponsabilizzazione di chi lo usa in caso di danni all'assistito?
Can you reformulate the question? So in case it gets damaged?
In caso di danno uso il defibrillatore e sbaglio qualcosa, la responsabilità di chi è?
Nobody, because the defibrillator, it speaks to you.
Perché il defibrillatore ti parla, quindi quando lo tiri fuori dalla parte dove viene tenuto.
And that's also one advantage of the defibrillator. You don't need to dial. And then the doctor, you can talk to a medical doctor acoustically, and he tells you what to do. And then also the defibrillator tells you, okay, you have to open the shirt of the person lying on the ground. And the defibrillator checks if there is really no heart activity, because it would be harmful if there already is a heart activity, and it electroshocks in a way. So the defibrillator makes sure there's really no heart activity to be measured, and only then it tells you, okay, take off your hands from the body now, and only then it starts reanimating. So we haven't had any. The only thing you can do wrong is not to do anything, because if the person already is too far away, then it won't be. You won't be able to get him back. But if there's another problem with consciousness but not the heart, then the defibrillator won't do anything. It's really smart technology. It's very sensitive, and it feels exactly if there is heart activity or not. And the defibrillator will only help and work if the heart has stopped beating. So it's really hard to do harm unless you point it in the head or something. But if you could use it like for reanimation, then there's really little chance, or we haven't had any cases yet, that you do more harm than there already is. Let's put it that way. And there's also there's always a check if it's working correctly. So in case the defibrillator is out of whatever energy or battery or something, there is a direct connection to the Red Cross unit. So they realize immediately when the defibrillator is sending weird signals, and it's being checked and replaced immediately. So far the technological part should be all right.
Ma il defibrillatore è quindi connesso in wifi localmente o connesso alla rete?
Yes, and we have a special contract also with the company that
con l'azienda che fa questi controlli regolari e che ci dà anche questa connessione 24 ore su 24.
The best protection, because we had the issues, the concerns that it will be stolen immediately, but this is also a big protection of theft, because as soon as you take it, then somebody talks to you, so people usually put it back there.
Beh, quindi un sistema molto intelligente, direi, molto completo. Beh, un ottimo esempio di partecipazione della popolazione, sicurezza, nuove tecnologie, coinvolgimento anche delle persone. Direi che è un bellissimo progetto, assolutamente. Ma quindi ti chiedevo, l'infrastruttura, cioè il defibrillatore ha bisogno di un'infrastruttura di connessione internet sostanzialmente, ed è un'infrastruttura in wifi, o hai il supporto del defibrillatore che è connesso, quando tu lo stacchi lui rimane connesso, oppure il wifi è interno al defibrillatore e non al supporto? Cioè era solo per capire se si realizza un'infrastruttura oppure semplicemente è tutto contenuto nel defibrillatore.
So what the infrastructure only needs electricity.
L'infrastruttura ha bisogno solo dell'elettricità, dell'energia, e il resto è tutto fatto con il wifi. E poi c'è un GPS che sta all'interno del fibrillatore, quindi in caso di furto sappiamo anche dove si trova, quindi lo possiamo andare a riprendere. Poi c'è questa connessione wifi alla stazione che poi ti mette anche in contatto con il dottore quando c'è l'emergenza in corso. Quindi ci sono tutte e 2 le parti sono connesse, via wifi sempre.
Io intanto ti ringrazio moltissimo per questa
You're welcome.
lezione, che a me piace sempre tantissimo ascoltare i progetti che fai e quello che fate a Vienna in generale. Quindi, come sai, ogni anno, io spero, te lo dico ogni anno, speriamo che l'anno prossimo di riuscire a farla in presenza questa scuola, così finalmente
Oh yes.
potrei venire a Cagliari invece che stare in mezzo alla neve a Vienna. Speriamo che questa pandemia
Oh yes, please take me out. Very
Va
nice.
bene. Se vuoi anche rimanere, adesso abbiamo l'altro webinar di Gianmarco Chiri che ci parla comunque di spazi pubblici. Lui è un architetto, quindi magari ci saranno elementi di comune interesse.